Our group was in charge of the book review of The End of Poverty, The Economic Possibility in Our Time. The group included Tonya Bodwin, Reese Gennard, Patrick Stump, and Jody Van Zandt. American economist Jeffrey Sachs is a native of Detroit, Michigan, and New York Times bestseller author who wrote The End of Poverty, Economic Possibilities of Our Time. Sachs received his bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees at Harvard and was considered a poverty and economics expert. He is author of other books including The Price of Civilization and The Age of Sustainable Development, all written around global economic state of poverty. He also serves as director of Earth Institute at Columbia University, as well as Quetelet Professor of Sustainable Development in Health Policy and Management. The End of Poverty is the economic outlook on our country by the year 2025. In the book, Sachs argues that extreme poverty, defined by the World Bank as incomes of less than $1 per day, can be eliminated globally by the year 2025 through carefully planned development aid. In the book, he stated poor countries that hit the economic bottom rung can at that point begin to pull itself up into the global market economy. This is also the point in which outside resources and funds would begin to diminish or altogether be eliminated. In The End of Poverty, Sachs draws on the scholarly expert and experience to argue that extreme global poverty can be eliminated if the wealthy nations of the world truly wish to do so. Sachs rejects the view of those who see globalization simply as a conspiracy to enable the rich and powerful to get richer at the expense of the poor and powerless. For Sachs, globalization, in some form or another, is definitely the wave of the future if carried out in an enlightened way, can be a source of hope and even and especially for the poorest people. He poses several questions around various countries and their current positions. For instance, he dives into how Africa fell into the trap of poverty while India and China are shaping the global economy. The point is to figure out why the vast amount of foreign aid being sent to these countries is not working to effectively change the economy. Although some areas of the poverty-stricken countries are able to begin to pull themselves up, what plan is in place for those that have not succeeded in that process? Jeffrey Sachs has traveled around the world to Ghana, Bolivia, Poland, and back to the United States, not only to study but live his theories. Within these travels, he has met many people from all walks of life, including dignitary leaders to discuss their country and get feedback on the current and future status and situation of the economy. Kofi Annan, the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations, served from 1997 to 2006. Annan played a significant role for the United Nations in developing improved human rights programs. Annan published a document called We the People, the Roles of the United Nations in the 21st Century. This document brought focus to the United Nations and the organization's responsibility to improving humanity. This work was especially important in establishing the Millennium Development Goals that was agreed to by all United Nations members in 2000. In 2001, Annan was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize along with the rest of the organization. The third major character in The End of Poverty is Victor Paz Estenssoro. Bolivia was facing a hyperinflation crisis during the 1980s. In 1985, Victor Paz Estenssoro was elected president of Bolivia for the third and final time. In his last term, with the economic and political advice of Jeffrey Sachs, Estenssoro instituted a sweeping conservative austerity program, reducing the government's role in the economy and controlling inflation, but with enormous social costs. The economic policies suggested by Sachs helped improve Bolivia's economic and social conditions. The fourth major character and the end of poverty is Leszek Bolshevik. In 1990, Poland was facing similar hyperinflation issues as Bolivia was during the 1980s. Leszek Bolshevik, the Deputy Prime Minister of Poland, approached Jeffrey Sachs about implementing changes to combat Poland's dangerous hyperinflation. Bolshevik, with the advice of Sachs and other economists, implemented the Bolshevik plan. By 1991, he had tamed hyperinflation, tightened government spending, lifted price controls, ended shortages, and removed obstacles that had inhibited the spontaneous emergence of the private sector. Bolshevik made very bold decisions in a time of great adversity. His actions helped Poland regain stability in the economy and improve the country's outlook. George W. Bush is the fifth and final main character in the end of poverty. George W. Bush was the 43rd President of the United States. He was elected into office in 2000 and served until 2008. In 2003, Bush founded the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, which guaranteed $15 million to be spent over the course of 5 years on prevention, treatment, and research of HIV/AIDS. President Bush made a bold decision to lead the humanitarian fight in Africa. He contributed more funding than any president before him and was also the global leader on the issue. Politicians from both sides of the aisle, as well as Sachs and many others, applauded the president's decision to support Africa even during a time of war. The main idea of the end of poverty, the economic possibility of our time, is to end poverty, specifically by 2025. To do this, increasing income to more than $1 a day for the poorest people is a main focal point. This increase in income creates opportunity for aid-giving countries and developing countries. The developing countries have an opportunity to take a step up from the bottom rung of the economic ladder and develop themselves. Aid-giving countries have a chance to reduce and finally eliminate aid to these countries and reinvest in themselves to progress their economic interests further. The Millennium Development Goals are the 8 international development goals established by the UN in 2000. These goals include eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, achieve universal primary education, promote equality and empower women, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, combat HIV/AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, ensure environmental sustainability, and global partnerships for development. These were all agreed by all nations in the UN as ways to address the needs of the poorest. Severe poverty is one of the greatest moral challenges facing humanity and one inescapable issue that too many families face around the world. Poverty violates moral values about what constitutes a minimally decent human life broadly shared throughout the world. The author of this book has readers judge the harmful impact of poverty on individuals and shows the moral repugnancy of these effects on human beings. He wants wealthy countries to put poverty high on their agenda. Funding of poor nations by the rich countries is crucial to eradicating poverty by 2025. One of the approaches to correct behaviors to end poverty is virtue ethics. According to this approach, if a nation has good character, that nation will behave ethical in a matter of course. The following 4 virtues have been identified to be primary to the ethics of ending poverty. First is compassion. It's a notion of relating to caring and includes a concern for others and awareness of their pain and suffering. Discernment is an intellectual trait. A discerning person is able to take decisive action based on insight resulting from a history of clear judgment and understanding. The third is trustworthiness. In this book, the author has a character trait that gives others confidence that he will do the right thing for the right reasons. Lastly, integrity. Throughout the book, the author was always behaving in a way that was consistent with the core values and beliefs. There are many principles on which to draw in moral reasoning to end poverty. To find solutions, the author should apply ethical theories and principles and determine the burden and benefits of any course of action. Many approaches can be used to solve ethical dilemmas. Although an approach does not guarantee a right decision, it provides a logical, systematic method for decision making. There are two major theories that guide ethical decision making, and those are deontology and utilitarian. In deontology, the deontology theory determines that what is right by applying ethical principles and moral rules. It does not vary the solution according to individual situations. One example is the rule, life must be maintained at all costs and in all circumstances. Strictly used, the deontological approach would not consider the quality of life or weigh the use of scarce resources against the likelihood that life maintained would be near normal. The utilitarian theory approach ethical dilemmas by analyzing the benefits and burden of any course of action to find one that will result in the greatest amount of good. With this approach, appropriate action may vary according to the situation. This practical approach is concerned more with the consequences of actions than the actions themselves. Decision making in ethical dilemmas may seem straightforward, but really rarely result in decisions agreed by everyone. Putting yourself in any situation is one of the guaranteed ways to understand what it is all about. Satch does this showing a true sacrifice with his family to travel around the globe to understand the economically traverse happenings in other countries, shows true dedication of getting to the end result and putting a plan in place. Everyone cannot afford to uproot their family and move from country to country to be a part of solving one of the world's greatest problems. However, Satch laid the foundation for others to simply begin the process. Even understanding the total situation allows the next person to move in the right direction and put programs in place to help others in need and teach the bottom rung of the economic ladder. One quote pulled from the book that we found very important to include is history is written by the rich, so the poor get blamed for everything. This is a view that some people have and that many people will view as being true.